Hey everybody, I'm here demonstrating our class from last week. We did succulents, so we created and planted, essentially, our own succulent garden. So I'm going to go through and show you some of the examples and also the materials that you're going to need. So you are going to need white paper, you are going to need a pencil, an eraser, probably a black marker. You can use a fine tip Sharpie or something even like a small thin marker, and it could be any color, but black tends to help define the design a little bit. And then colored pencils, markers. We've had kids use watercolors, so you could color any way you want. Crayons, markers, colored pencils, however you want. So first few things. We're going to go through a couple different styles, and then you'll get the opportunity to just create your own. So this class was taught for the week of April 25th, so for those classes. So here is the finished work. So we're going to be making a pot of any design, and then we're going to learn these different styles of cactus and succulents. So most cactus are succulents. They're fun because there's a lot of different shapes and colors. So you can be as expressive as you want with colors. We'll learn how to do the flower, the squash, and then these kind of taller ones. Also, they do have blooms and sprigs sometimes, so you can get as creative as you want. At home, if you want to look up a picture of an actual cactus, you can go ahead and do that. We actually have quite a few cactus here in Utah, and not necessarily some that grow kind of taller like in California, Arizona, things like that. Ours are kind of more low to the ground, but all the same, you could find one and use it as an example, and maybe you want to do a whole succulent cactus garden that's all native plants, so that could be fun too. Or you could just be really expressive, and like I went with really bright colors, which is not usually what I choose, but I wanted to show you how you could use this technique to be as expressive with your art form as you wanted. So the first one, we're going to go through a bunch of different styles. So the first style is going to be the classic cactus shape. So that's kind of what you see on maybe a movie or a cartoon. It's kind of like one central kind of like stump, and then it's got multiple arms that kind of come out, and they're usually a soft shape, but they can be square, and we'll learn about that later. So that is the classic cactus shape. So that's shape one. So you'll want to leave space on your paper for 9 different practice shapes. This is just going to give you your practice, and that way you can go through and design your pot of cactus and succulents later. So the next shape is based off of a snake plant, which is another really cool plant. Now it's not a cactus or a succulent, but it's a cool shape, and it's similar to some other ones. So this is the snake shape. So they all kind of look like they're originating out of the same base, and then they've got kind of the jagged top. So that one's really fun. And then the next one is a squash shape. So from our optical illusion class, we created half circles. So that's really going to give you the shape with the squash. So it kind of looks like a pumpkin. So it does have a central point at which all the half circles tend to originate from, and that gives it that optical illusion. Also, it can have a little sprig. So that's the squash shape. The next one, and in our textures class, we learned about different lines and patterns that we can create on surfaces to give the illusion of either fuzzy or hairy or prickly. So cactuses have a lot of prickles, and sometimes they're fuzzy, and succulents are sometimes really smooth, almost like how you would think like a water body would be, because they hold water inside the cells for a long time. So the next one is a block shape, and that is like a taller cactus, but on the top it's got a diagonal line giving it a blocky shape. It's also useful for drawing gemstones or rocks if you want to do that. And again, I put lines down it so you could see the different options to align and make pricklies and fuzzies. So you can combine this with this for cool results too. So you could do the classic cactus shape, but with blocky tops. So something for you to try. The next one is dome. So this is kind of like block and squash combined. So you're going to originate 2 dome shapes, and at the top there's going to be a central point where all of those half circles that are running down the dome shape are connecting. So that's going to again give you an optical illusion. The next one is aloe, which is from aloe vera. So aloe vera, you can eat it. It's actually, if you ever go to Winco, they have big stalks of aloe vera that you can look at. It kind of almost looks like celery, where it's curved in on one side, and then it's got a really thick bottom. So the oval, it's kind of an oval shape with a point, but it does have kind of like a prickly edge. So that's the aloe shape. So if you want to do that one, this would also work really good if you want to put anything like an air plant into your potted garden. You could do that too. So the next one is the lotus bud. And this one's really fun, especially if you're going to do succulents or you're going to do buds out of the top of your succulent garden. You can also use this technique to make a vine. So you're just going to start with a teardrop shape, and then you're going to layer teardrops behind it. You can do 3, so that would be the classic, kind of like what a tulip looks like. Or you can do 4 or 5 or separate them. You can even just do 1 teardrop as a single bud shape too. So, like for example, on the pumpkin I've got a few little kind of viney things. It's just a single teardrop shape. So a single teardrop shape upside down, and then you can draw a line down the center. That's a basic way to make a leaf pattern or a petal pattern. So these techniques kind of go through a lot of different organic materials. So the next one is a lotus or succulent base. So this one starts with a circle in the center, and I'm going to break this one down because it's a little bit more complicated. So this is another example of the succulent shape. So that one started with 3 points. You can start in the center of your succulent shape with either just a plain circle, or you can do a spiral. I like the spiral because it kind of tends to look like the whole thing's falling in on itself or coming out from the center. So you just draw a spiral. It can be, oh, that's a crazy one. It can be as wobbly and open as wide as crazy as you want, okay? So then you're going to divide it into 3 points. Now you can do 2, 3, or 4 points. You choose. So I just do 3 little lines, and they don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. It's your choice, right? This is your art. So what I'm going to do is from those points, I'm going to draw a teardrop. And at this point, it actually kind of looks like a sago lily, which is our state flower. So you can see how this would really work for you to draw a lot of other flowers too. Some of our students this week ended up putting flowers in their pot instead of cactuses, or they did like 1 or 2 cactuses and then went crazy and did most of them flowers. So it's up to you. These techniques are going to work for whatever you want. So then once you've got your first row of petals, you're going to go through and add between each layer, you're going to add your second row of petals all the way around. Now, sometimes you get lost on these because they are an optical illusion. So there's the first 3, and then the second group of 3. So now that created a bunch of extra spots, so we can put a petal between there, 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 and there. So you'll keep increasing. And you get to decide how big you want your petals to be. You may not want to keep it symmetrical. Maybe you want to kind of start to change it a little bit. Maybe your petals are going to get bigger as they go towards the outside. So that's the outside layer. And it doesn't have to be perfect either. You don't have to get everything in the exact. Sometimes you can just go with, you know, how you want it to look in the end, because we know that petals and organic things, all or growing things, plants, trees, they have a tendency to reach towards the sun, so they may not be getting the same amount of sun on each side, so they may not be symmetrical. They may have sort of, you know, one side that's bigger or fluffier than the other, and that's okay. So that's the succulent or lotus. So you could use it for a lot of different ways. You can also turn this into chrysanthemum shape. So there's a simple chrysanthemum shape. And then you can also do the same technique with a daisy. So the technique is the same for both of those techniques. And then here is also an example of a vine technique with the teardrop. And then there's another bud. Okay, so that's 8 of the 9 shapes. The last one is what I'm calling the branch shape, and it really is sort of it kind of looks like seaweed. So it's very abstract, free form, flowing. It's good for building texture. The other thing that you might want to add in your succulent garden is either moss or lichen. So this shape might work well for those. You can color them any colors. And this one's plain, but from our textures class, we know that if we draw straight lines, we're going to have it look smooth. So you can have it look smooth if you want, or not. Okay, so those are the basic plant shapes. And then you now get to decide if you want to put what the container looks like. And you may have something around your house that's a container that you really like, that's cool. It could be even a mug. Maybe you want to put a succulent in a coffee mug. So the basic container shapes are going to be like a fish bowl. And you can also do what would be like a terrarium, where you would actually have your succulents inside the big fish bowl. So that's an option too. One of our brilliant students actually did that, and it was so cute. You can do rocks and sand and pebbles and all your textures inside. You could do something that was like a square, just a square pot. And you could also have something that was tall, like a rectangle. And then you can also do something that looks like a terracotta pot, so it's usually bigger on the top and smaller at the bottom. The other thing that you could do that I don't have an example of is like a coiled pot, something with ridges or lines or rows, because you get to decorate the pot as well. So the pot, I like to draw the basic shape in first and then put on my decorations. So I drew the terracotta style pot. And then I went through and did a lot of shading with colored pencils to make it look like it had dimension. Stephanie also did the arches around the top of her pot, and it gave that optical illusion as well. I did rocks, so I traced some rocks in there at the base. And then you can see really closely that I filled in all the space with what would be like kind of moss or you know, like maybe a smaller filler plant or something like that. You can be as creative as you want. Again, I've got this little vine hanging down, and there are so many different neat succulents. Some do look like more like a vine. Some have really flat leaves, some have really puffy leaves, some are pink, some are green, some are yellow, so there's every single color. There's even like blue and purple colors, so you really can get creative with all the colors that you want to do. So I hope that you have fun with this succulent garden. It's nice because you can do these and maybe create it for a neighbor or a friend as a gift too. So, you know, get your garden growing, and we'll see you next week. Bye.